Kingscreek is a horror podcast, and thus the content in this episode may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
You are now entering Kingscreek. Episode 4, Teacher's Pet.
Hello everyone, and welcome back. After some serious consideration, I've decided to retire the name Bachman Cast. Uncle Mark's files are something mysterious and strange, and I think they deserve a name more in line with that. I don't know what that name is yet, but I'll get back to you. As for those actual files, I have got you all a good one today. I'm recording this in the fall, September to be specific, and one thing is clear. The back-to-school spirit is in the air. Or at least, that's what the commercials they like to play on daytime TV channels say. I can hardly watch an episode of Jerry Springer without seeing 20 different ads for glue or pencils or whatever. It almost makes me nostalgic. Almost. In that vein, today's story fits the theme of back to school quite well. It comes from Case B23, Substitutive Authority Figures. A pretty thin file by our usual standards. The only things in here are a couple of Uncle Mark's notes and a complaint letter. Susan Parker, a student at Sorensen High School, wrote said letter to the SHS Parent-Teacher Association in October of 1998, just a few weeks into the school year. Almost exactly 10 years ago, give or take a few weeks. I don't know what kind of high school student writes a letter to the PTA, but I guess we're about to find out. Letter begins. To the esteemed members of the Sorensen High PTA, good day to all of you. I hate to trouble you or distract you from your incredibly important roles in shaping our community, but I would like to register a complaint regarding the employment of a specific teacher at SHS. I hate to question your judgment, for I know this is a position that is without a lot of reward, but this is a rather pressing matter. No fear, I am here to present the case of the students and provide important context. This is my senior year at Sorensen High, and I have spent my time here becoming more familiar with the faculty. I feel as though I have a good relationship with almost every teacher, administrator, and counselor, even more so than some of my own classmates. So, when I heard that Mr. Adler, the new biology teacher, was to join the team, I wanted to make a good first impression. I was admittedly upset that we would no longer have Miss Thatcher after the incident last spring, as she was one of my favorites. But times change, and I congratulate myself on having the strength to change with it. Or at least, I thought I did. When I first learned that I would be having Mr. Adler as my homeroom teacher, I was relieved. This would make my job much easier and would give me time throughout the rest of the day to practice my routine and lay the groundwork for future academic success. The honor roll is only the beginning, after all. Meeting Mr. Adler and establishing a friendly relationship wouldn't take very long at all, I thought. On September 2nd, when the school year first started, I got up bright and early and made my way to school, ready to start the year off right. I was filled with optimism as I walked down the familiar halls, my mind filled with visions of how my first meeting with Mr. Adler would go. Handshakes, smiles, and maybe even an apple if necessary. I try not to use that option typically. It feels archaic. All of those visions melted away the second I entered the classroom. To begin with, the room was empty. I'm used to being early, and I suppose the first day of school would make it harder for people to find their way to new classes, but I was still expecting at least a couple of other members of my homeroom. But instead, I stood in the doorway, the only person in the room. It was quiet. unnervingly quiet. There was no familiar hum of the air conditioning or the plumbing. When the door closed behind me, I couldn't even hear the buzz of student chatter that usually accompanied a passing period. You could hear a pin drop, and it would be deafening. The air also just wasn't right. It was cold, and not that pleasant chill of a late summer morning. No, it was freezing, made doubly strange by the aforementioned lack of air conditioning. My teeth started to chatter, and I could feel goosebumps forming up and down my arms and legs, my tank top and shorts exposing me to the chill. Looking around, the room was strikingly bare. There were some empty bookshelves, desks, and a single whiteboard, all standard classroom implements, but no posters, or framed pictures, or anything. It occurred to me later that there wasn't even any lab equipment, which seemed strange for a supposed biology teacher. My thoughts churned with all of this as I slowly made my way to sit down. I plunked my backpack next to my chair and turned to take my seat when I froze. Standing behind the desk was the man I would come to know as Mr. Adler. He was tall, with wide shoulders and arms crossed behind his back. He wore a crisp button-up shirt with a black vest and bow tie. His thin, pitch-black shoes shined in the fluorescent light. His face was pale, with paper-white skin, a sharp nose, and spiky black hair. Thick, horn-rimmed glasses did nothing to obscure his piercing eyes, which were the color of storm clouds. I remember them in great detail because he was staring directly at me, his expression unreadable as he stood perfectly still. I had no idea how he had gotten in the room without me noticing. It was like he had just appeared. I stood there for a moment, in shock, before I realized I was staring and stammered out some kind of excuse. Mr. Adler's expression didn't change. He just tilted his head slightly. Thinking back on it, I could have sworn that his head tilted just a little too much. I don't know why, but that's how I can best describe it. After his lack of a response, I trailed off. We stood awkwardly for a moment, the silence even more deafening. I felt like I couldn't move. My heart was pounding. Why wasn't he saying anything? Had I done something to offend him? Why was he just staring at me? The silence was broken as more students started to stream in. They were chattering amongst themselves, seemingly not noticing the stare-off they had walked into. I snapped out of whatever had frozen me and sat down, burying my face in a textbook. I didn't read anything in it. I was too distracted to, focused on making sure my eyes didn't meet Mr. Adler's again. Students kept chatting around me, but all I could hear was the deafening silence from the front of the room. He still wasn't saying anything. For all I knew, he was still staring at me. Homeroom only lasted 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. As soon as I heard the bell ring, I was out of there like a shot. I didn't know why I was so rattled. Mr. Adler wasn't like anything I had ever dealt with before. He didn't even do anything, but somehow it was wrong. As the day went on, though, I forgot about him. I had other classes to attend and teachers to fortify already strong relationships with. And that I did. Everything settled into a familiar routine. But when I came back the next morning, I was reminded of the previous day's encounter, and my chest filled with dread. I considered not going to homeroom, but the thought of missing attendance and ruining my perfect record was enough to stop me. As I approached the entrance to his room, the goosebumps returned and my heart started pounding in my ears. The door was open, and I could hear the chatter of other students from within. I took a deep breath and peeked inside. It seemed normal. There were some posters on the wall now, diagrams of rodent anatomy, instructions on how to properly dissect owl pellets, a chart with the food chain of the forest sprawled across the back wall. Students were talking amongst themselves, just like yesterday, and the room seemed a little less cold than before. Mr. Adler was sitting at his desk, staring silently at the students. He didn't blink once. I stepped inside the room, and almost the instant my foot crossed the barrier of the doorway, Mr. Adler's head spun in my direction. The movement was smooth and lightning fast, and now he once again had me frozen in his gaze. I hardly dared to breathe. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. At least, I think he smiled. His eyes didn't change at all. He still stared at me without even coming close to blinking. But his mouth twisted and squirmed like he wasn't sure what muscles to use. Eventually, he pulled his lips across his face without opening his mouth. It was a little too wide. Just a plain smile with the proportions of a grin. His mouth wasn't done moving though. The lips started to wiggle, just barely opening and closing enough to let sound escape. Because yes, for the first time, he was now speaking to me.
Good morning.
His words were slow and deliberate, contrasting with a shockingly high-pitched voice. But it wasn't a funny high pitch, like a clown or a cartoon character. It was more of a screech or a squeal, like a tea kettle or train whistle. It sent a new round of chills down my spine. Everything in my body was telling me that something was seriously wrong with this guy. His eyes followed me as I went to sit down. This time I sat in the very back of the room, normally something I would never do, just so that I wouldn't have to feel his gaze upon me. I once again buried my face in a textbook, doing everything I could to stop myself from shaking. This became routine for the next month or so. I would always come to school, he would always be there, rarely speaking and never blinking. No one else seemed to notice anything strange about him. Maybe because they were all too focused on chatting amongst themselves. I did some investigating and found out that students who actually had classes with him could rarely remember anything about their time together. He never assigned homework, and whatever assignments they had in class, students usually passed with flying colors. To everyone else, he was a great, if quiet, teacher. So, I decided I would just try to ignore him. I had my actual classwork to focus on, after all. In those mornings, I would just give him a nod, and then hunker down to focus on whatever project I had, trying not to make eye contact. Eventually, he faded into the background, and I started to forget about him on the time outside our 15 minutes every morning. That is, until homecoming season. I had to pick up another extracurricular activity for my college applications, so I chose to join the event planning committee. The first few weeks were fairly uneventful, with maybe the occasional fundraiser. But once October rolled around, things kicked into high gear as we started preparing for the homecoming dance. It was chaos. There were only 5 of us, and we had to deal with everything from finding a DJ who was cheap, available, and school appropriate, to trying to pick a theme, to even making sure that all the catering could provide for a school of our size. It got to the point that a week before the dance, we were short on chaperones. So, I was tasked with finding a few new ones. It quickly became apparent that we didn't have a lot of options, chaperone-wise. Most of our parents either already were involved or had refused, and the same was true of much of the faculty. I got desperate as my options started to run low, and my mind turned to Mr. Adler. Sure, he was off-putting, but if there was one thing I knew he had, it was a pair of eyes, and that was good enough to make him a chaperone. It was in the middle of the morning when I came to this conclusion. Homeroom had already concluded, so I decided to talk to him during his lunch. I had found out previously from the other teachers that he never ate in the teacher's lounge, instead always eating alone in his classroom. Just another strange quirk, I supposed, but nothing that concerned me. Thinking back now, I wish this was when I decided to trust the nagging feeling in my gut telling me to turn around and run. But I really needed those chaperones, so I soldiered on ahead. The door to his classroom was closed, and it didn't seem like any lights were on.
I figured he had finished his lunch and had taken a walk, or that maybe he didn't eat his lunch in his classroom after all, or something like that. I was just about to leave when I heard something. Upon closer inspection, the door was cracked open, ever so slightly. I could hear shuffling, squeaking, and a flap of air, like someone was waving a thick blanket. It was strange, and combined with the image of Mr. Adler's piercing gaze, it created an intense curiosity in me that overpowered the part of my brain that was screaming at me to take my hand away from that door and turn around. I wish I had listened. I eased the door open and pressed my eye to the crack. The inside of the room was dark. The only light spilled from cracks between the closed blinds hanging in front of the windows. From the angle I was at, I couldn't see Mr. Adler's desk, but I could see the student desks, or at least where the student desks would have been if they weren't piled in the corner. In their place, I saw a thick plastic sheet covering the floor, the type people use to protect their floors when painting walls. Sitting in the middle of that tarp was a live, shivering possum. I realized this was the source of the squeaking as it made the noise while it looked around, clearly frightened of something. The gears in my head started turning. Why was this animal here? Was this some kind of biology demonstration? Why wasn't it in a cage? Where was Mr. Adler? I barely had time for that last question to pop into my head before something massive whooshed past the door from where Mr. Adler's desk would have been, descending upon the possum as it let out one last terrified squeal. The enormous thing grabbed it in its beak. There was a sickeningly loud snap, and the possum went limp in the beast's jaws. It dropped the still warm corpse on the ground and leaned closer to it, staring unblinkingly. And in that moment, I realized with rising terror that I recognized it. I recognized the black and white feather pattern that covered its body. I recognized the dark, shiny, scaled feet. I recognized the paper white face, the sharp beak, the spiky black feather tufts on the top of its head, and the long, outstretched wings that I realized, when I thought they were arms, I had never seen the hands of because they were always behind its back or underneath the table. But most of all, I recognized the piercing, storm cloud eyes that stared at the possum's body with the same intensity they had once stared at me. I watched in horror as the creature that I knew as Mr. Adler picked up the possum in its jaws, tilted its head back, and began to swallow it whole. I started slowly backing away at this point, my heart pounding a mile a minute in my ears while my mind raced with what to do. But before I could come up with anything, my shoe squeaked on the linoleum floor. The movement in Mr. Adler's classroom stopped. I decided that I shouldn't stick around to see what the avian freak show would do with any witnesses, so I bolted, tearing through the different hallways and locking myself in a stall in the girls' bathroom until the end of lunch. It took an hour longer for my heart to stop racing, and I was jumpy for the rest of the day. I haven't been back to homeroom since. It's been a week, and I know it will reflect poorly on my attendance record, but I just can't face that thing again. I can't bear to be in the same room as those piercing storm cloud eyes. I'm begging every member of the PTA to take this seriously and remove the thing posing as Mr. Adler from our school. I believe it poses a legitimate danger to the health and safety of the student body, and it must be taken care of post-haste. I implore you to listen to me before it decides it has an appetite for something bigger than a possum. Sincerely, Susan Parker, Honor Roll student. An admittedly thrilling story that is nonetheless lacking in any actual evidence. According to the notes Uncle Mark left here from his various interviews with the staff, there was no real follow-up from the PTA after this letter. Mr. Adler, no first name given, remained employed at Sorensen High School for 3 years before taking a sudden leave of absence in March of 2002, never to be seen again. Members of the faculty described him as a shy and reclusive person who almost never spoke to anyone but his own students. Apparently, he was dearly missed, not least of which because his students, on average,
consistently had the highest biology grades of any teacher in SHS's history. As for Ms. Parker, she also seemed to be doing well. Shortly after this letter, she transferred homerooms and seemingly all issues were resolved. She graduated in the spring of '99, got her degree at WSU, and then came back here to teach. Apparently, she's still at Sorensen High, nearly 10 years later. Good for her, I guess. It seemed like she idolized the staff enough already. This must have been her dream job. Provided there weren't any weird bird colleagues, I guess. The only other thing of interest here is something Uncle Mark highlighted in red ink, which he seems to be doing a lot. The street that Miss Parker lived on when she attended SHS. Gossamer Lane. Huh. I have yet to fully decipher Uncle Mark's filing system, but it doesn't take a genius to tell that this is important in some way. And if it isn't, well, at least I know where to go to find stories of owl people teaching classes. This is Damien Bachman, signing off.
Today's episode of Kingscreek was written and performed by Thomas S. Dennis. It was produced by James Makepeace, and the score was composed by Kai After Kai. Script supervision is provided by James Makepeace and Ryan Kennedy. Our cover art is by CyberGrapeUK, and our social media manager is Ryan Kennedy. All episodes are a production of Tracer Magnum Entertainment. If you'd like to support the show, rate and review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Chatbox, or whatever service you use to listen to our show. It helps tremendously and ensures we're seen by more and more of the unsuspecting public. If you'd like to get in touch with us or become involved with the community, join our Discord server or follow us on Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and Tumblr, all under the handle @KingscreekOfficial. Share with your friends, family, or anyone else you want to ensnare in our web. And above all else, thank you for listening.